we have to ask ourselves the question, what is going on with the human experience right now? And I really think it's pretty simple. Life is giving us the opportunity to move out of this experience of being adolescents and just consuming and playing and living basically unconsciously, and just moving into an experience of becoming adults.
Because let's face it, care of people, care of earth, and benevolence in whatever we produce to share in the abundance. I don't think we could ask for three more essential and significant principles in life.
Everyone would go past, and if I had a chance, I'd say, please help yourself some to tomatoes. So there were people who would come ready with their bags, and they'd bring the kids, and the kids would help to pick them. In LA, people don't talk much to each other, and there's not much of a reason for stopping and communicating. So I think last summer that was one of the real delights.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson, and we're here at my dining room table with three guests who are here to put on a permaculture design certificate course in Grass Valley. I'm here with the host, Vijay Chaitanya, and the main course instructors, or co-instructors I should say, Bill Wilson, welcome back.
Thank you.
Wayne Wiseman, welcome back. This is your, second or third time teaching here?
Second time.
Which means you're doing something right. Tell me, Vijay, where does the course happen?
The course happens at the Shivananda Ashram Yoga Farm, a bit of a mouthful. And an ashram is an interesting place to hold a permaculture course.
Why?
Because we do yoga.
All right.
And so this is interesting thing about why would people who do yoga be interested in permaculture. So I was at the ashram for 3 years, managing the course, the center there. And 2 years ago, by a whole series of circumstances, I found myself on a permaculture course that Wayne and Bill were running in the Midwest. And it was one of those amazing experiences where at the end of the week you thought, wow, I'm feeling really different and I know a whole lot more about me than I did before. And it felt really important that other people who are on the yoga path, because the yoga path is very much about learning who you are and trying to grow into, a much more awareness of that. And through the permaculture course, I realized that was happening. And it was also very much about working with community. So at the ashram, it's also about working with community. And I was aware that where we are in Grass Valley, we have 80 acres. And I really wanted to look at how we could bring the care and the balance and the harmony of those 80 acres, how we could live and work there more sustainably, how it would work for us, and how as the residents there we could work more in communion with the land. So at the end of the course I said, wow, it'd be great if you guys could come and be at the ashram. And they said, oh, we've never done it in an ashram before. And I said, there's always a first time. So last year, a year ago, it was a very popular course and we all had a great time. And so here we are back again, and we've got another group of people ready to run.
And excited. Well, how is this, you're from the Midwest, so how do you do your course, Bill? How do you structure this?
Well, one of the things that we stumbled on early on, with our first training, is most design certification courses run over a period of usually 12 to 14 days. And one of the challenges that we had in our own schedules was finding when we could both have 2 weeks off at the same time. And at the same time, we also know it's a challenge for some of our students. And my wife and I had experience hosting educational events over telephone or through a webinar technology. And I suggested that to Wayne, and I said, how about if we do some webinars ahead of time, maybe cover some of the fundamentals, the textbook aspects of the training, and then have people come on site for just 1 week. And in that week, we can give them a lot more hands-on and get into some of the more specifics, but let's do some of the work ahead of time. We were kind of shooting from the hip. We weren't sure how it would work, but we decided that, well, let's just give it a try. It made a lot of sense, and maybe people would respond. We were hoping to get 12 students, and in a design course, that's a pretty good number, 12 to 18 students. We ended up with, I think it was 37 students.
First course that we did together.
Yeah, 37 students.
Whoa.
So what happened is we stumbled on to something that had been a challenge for a lot of people, and that was they can find maybe the money to take a design course, but they can't find 2 weeks. So what we do now, and we've been working on this for 3 years now, this will be our 15th design course,
Great.
and so we do a lot ahead of time now. We found that that month before the course is just golden. There's so much that students can learn in that period of time. We run them through an entire textbook. We developed 150 questions from the text that we use, the Earth User's Guide to Permaculture, to give students a study guide, a way to know, am I absorbing this? Am I getting the critical elements out of it? Wayne and I went into our cache of reserves or supplementary materials, pulled out maybe 30 different handouts, and have 10 of those as required reading. The other 20 is just reference material for students to have after their course, or if they have a specific area they want
So
to
it
get
sounds
to.
like in that month, do they get on the phone with you or on the webinar so that they get some information, some teaching from you as well as the readings?
Right, we have a series of webinars. We do one live set of webinars at the beginning of the year, and all the subsequent courses get all of those recordings, and then plus they get a live session with me a month before the course starts, and then a live session with Wayne answering details and questions the week before they show up for their course.
So they really get a chance to be immersed, is what it sounds like. I mean,
That's the
pretty
goal.
intense for
It's
a month.
exciting.
Yes, I mean in that month previous to the course, we're adamant about them taking the time to learn as much as they possibly can, because what used to happen in the course is that we would do these live webinars and we'd cover a lot of ground, but we always felt as we got on the ground that we wanted to go back over the basic methodologies and basic principles of permaculture. This took up a much too large block of time. And we also wanted to be able to give them more hands-on opportunities. Because in order to be able to take this information and tie it together so that they have something to work with when they leave, you've got to be able to, what we learn theoretically, you've got to be able to use your hands in order to be able to do something with it. So we want them to leave with that sort of feeling of stability inside of themselves, that they could take this out into the world. Because one of the issues that we ran into in the past was that we're developing this community over 8 days, actually even over longer than 8 days, because they're in communication with each other online before the course. And then when they leave, a lot of times they go back into the world by themselves and they don't have that kind of camaraderie. So we wanted to give them some tools and where they could actually feel it in their body to go back out and begin their process.
So the course that you're starting tomorrow here, right, is the hands-on portion? Is that right, the on-the-ground portion?
Yeah, it's
How do you- what do you
obviously
do?
it's where everybody shows up, and you can really get into the meat of it. You cover the foundations and basics through the webinars, but now's our opportunity to zero in on specific areas. And one of the things that a design course does is it touches on a broad range of subjects. Everything from how do you create the physical landscape, what do you do with water, what do you do with sun, what do you do with the wind, what do you do with how do you get your energy, and then what do you do with all these products as they move through the product? Are you able to through the property? Are you able to harvest them and benefit from them, or do they become a problem? Too much water, too much wind. These are things. Too much sun. Why not figure out ways to harvest all those resources? So we'll get into more specifics, but you have a 72-hour course. Some of it's done ahead of time and some on site. There's only so much you can do with your hands. We can't go out there and everybody build a cob building. Everybody go out there and build an outhouse or build design an entire landscape. But you can do a few pieces of that, and you can go out. We take students out, and we do a lot of the classroom time out in the field, where we're looking at the exact thing that we're talking about. Where we can walk this thing, where we can touch it, we can get on the backside of a solar panel and see what it looks like. Put a shovel in the ground and actually dig a swale for a certain distance. And if we're lucky, we might even get some rain, and have it fill up in the process. So. And that seems to be, we've really been working on trying to find a balance between the text room time and getting people outside and having it part of their.
So in this next 8 days, give me a taste for if I were getting to be a mouse in somebody's pocket on this course. What would I have to experience?
All right. So the key to all of this, traditionally in the course, the way that Bill Mollison set it up. Bill Mollison, of course, was the creator of this permaculture idea. was for students to go through this curriculum that he developed, and I'll talk about the curriculum in a minute, and then come up with a final design. So in other words, you would focus on a particular project. And usually it was a project wherever you were. So in other words, if the course is held in Grass Valley, that we might work on designing the property at Grass Valley. And so that, part of the brilliance in that is that the students could take home this design and begin their portfolio if they wanted to go out and consult with others or if they wanted to teach. But the key to all of this, in order to get to that point, the key to all of it starts with, the whole thing begins with observation. So observing the landscape, trying to understand the movement of all these different elements that Bill was just speaking about. How does water move through the property? How does the wind move through the property? Where are the prevailing winds coming from? Where is the sun rising at specific times of the year, from the autumnal equinox, the summer solstice, etc., all the way through. And to begin to understand the energies that are pouring into this piece of property. I always liken it to an artist that comes to a painting with a frame around it and is a blank canvas, and they are putting their hand inside the framework and dividing up that canvas and trying to find some sort of balance and harmony in the final products that when we look at it, it's aesthetically very pleasing, right? In essence, that's what all these energies that are coming into a piece of property are sculpting this piece of property or painting this piece of property.
What a nice image, I like
Yeah.
sculpting.
And then the other key to this, and then I can get into a little bit more specifics about what's in the curriculum, is we want to try to hold as much material and energy on the property as possible and make use of what's in our immediate environment. And one of the basic principles is to make the least amount of change for the greatest effect. And also use the biological intelligence that's already happening in the landscape. So in other words, rather than us forcing a control on the land or forcing a footprint on the land, some sort of major footprint on the property, that we're able to, through our observation and our understanding and assessment of what we'd already got there, to make use of what's already happening in the ecology that's taking place all the time on the land.
So what I hear in that is the sculptor, the permaculture sculptor here, is working with the elements, maybe tuning them or modifying or enhancing them in some ways, rather than just sort of plunking something on top, like a superficial layer on top of that land.
Exactly, that's a good metaphor. And we're trying to mimic our local ecosystem, our local bioregion, what's happening there. So we go through, our basic methodologies, which they've already learned a lot in the pre-course materials, but we constantly use those as a reminder of the direction that we want to go in. And through observation, we begin to understand the patterns that are happening on the land. So we do all kinds of observational exercises. So we're looking at the patterns that water is creating, that wind is creating, that changes in topography, and just the movement even of the seasons, and the greater cycles. So we're constantly focusing on those patterns, and then of course we are going to place our own patterns in the landscape. That's human nature, right? So we want to try to work the two together, and kind of getting back to what you were just talking about. And then we look at water, we look at soil. I mean, one of the things that I always remind people is that there's such a thing as peak oil right now, but even more important than that, probably 1,000 times more important than that, is peak water and peak soil. Because we run out of those, and it doesn't look good. It's not a pretty picture.
I understand. I mean, people are already raising the flag here about water concerns all over the planet. But what do you mean by peak soil?
Why don't you talk about that? 'Cause, yeah.
Well, one of the things that was shocking for me to learn was that in the United States, or North American continent actually, since we started farming agriculturally with industrial agriculture, turning the soil every year, we've lost half the topsoil on the North American continent.
Half.
Yeah, one of the challenges with industrial agriculture or annual agriculture, where you're putting the seed in every year, is you have to prepare a seed bed. You have to disturb the soil. And in the process of disturbing the soil or turning the soil, just like when you open the door to your fireplace and air rushes in and the flames flow up, it's the same thing with the bacteria in the soil. They need water, they need food, which is the humus material, and they need oxygen. And when you turn the soil, you're dumping lots of oxygen in there, and the bacteria go, whoa, party. They reproduce, they expand, and they consume a lot of the organic matter. The organic matter in the soil, native soils, is about 13%, forest and prairie. And yet when you start turning the soil, just in a period of 10 years, you can drop that 13% humus content down to about 3%, and over a period of 20 years get down to under 1%. Humus holds water in the soil. It is the sponge of the soil. So now we have a situation where all over the North American continent, wherever there's farming land, most of that today, the organic content of most industrial farm soils is under 1%. So where does the water go when it comes down? And now the soil is also exposed. And so now you have the situation where you have massive amounts of erosion. And it's not just water erosion, we have wind erosion too. Oftentimes in the spring, you open the soil, it sits there, you put the seed in, and it doesn't rain for a month, and now you've got soil blowing. In 1 year, just in Kansas, in 1 year, Cornell University documented they lost 2 inches of topsoil in Kansas in 1 year. Now that's unusual, thank God that doesn't happen often, but it can happen that quickly. So now we have this situation where we've lost half the topsoil on the North American continent. Actually, we export more topsoil than we export grain.
No.
More topsoil flows out of the mouth of the Mississippi River than all the corn and all of the soybeans.
And so part of the question is, it was, there isn't, if we've lost half of it, it's not just, we're not getting more back.
That's correct.
Right.
And consider this, the Middle East and most of northern Africa were very fertile areas 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. But industrial agriculture, annual agriculture, where you come in and you turn the soil every year, you always, always, always lose the topsoil unless you are very conscious of managing that soil intensively and putting different components back into the soil, organic matter.
So the
So
way
you
we're
can
headed-
farm annually and build the topsoil, but much better to figure out a way to grow food that doesn't require that we turn the soil constantly. And that's one of the things permaculture really looks strongly into is, well, it's like an apple orchard. I mean, we have an orchard in our community that for 15 years it wasn't even touched. It was almost abandoned. But 20 years later, you go back in there, clean up the orchard, and it still produces apples every year. Nobody turns the soil, nobody uses herbicides, pesticides, nobody does anything with the trees, and yet we get this bountiful crop of apples every year.
So
well, what
that's-
else could we have in that orchard
You're
besides
talking
just
about
apples?
doing all of our, not just orchards, but vegetables and other
Absolutely.
things as well.
Yeah, not even just vegetables, but we're looking at, we are, so in the course content, we're looking at small intensive systems as opposed to these large horizontal,
Monocultures.
monocultures, megacultures, whatever you want to call them. So if we look at a landscape only, one of the misconceptions is that people will say that they want to permaculture their backyard because they're only looking at the agricultural side of it. But the reality is that when you're looking at a piece of land comprehensively, you have to take into consideration the built environment, how energy is being used on the property, how water is being used, what is the so-called waste stream, and waste is only a piece of programming that we've learned to live with, but it's not waste. We need to redefine what that is. That is another possibility in order to be able to reuse and build topsoil. So we have to look at all these different elements and how all of these elements are interacting. So during the course, we look at all these different aspects and we look at how to set those up in some sort of functional relationship, not some sort of, I would say in functional relationship, where everything is exchanging with everything else in the landscape. And this is the more rigorous part of working on a permaculture design, to be able to set up these relationships. So we may place chickens in the landscape, but we also know that chickens have needs and behaviors and intrinsic characteristics that we try to match those up with other elements in the landscape. And this is the basis for, this is what happens in an ecology, which Mollison was trained as a field biologist and ecologist. And a lot of, if you start to dig into the meat of what permaculture is about, in the essence, it comes out of this ecological understanding. So we are attempting to create an ecology on our property, a food web where everything is exchanging with everything else. Eat and be eaten, and share the bounty. And through that, and finding balance through all of this and creating these functional relationships, we create more yield. We create more yield for ourselves, and of course, when there is too much yield, then we have the opportunity to distribute that in an ethical fashion and in a benevolent fashion. So, small intensive systems, really focusing in on what's essential, what our real needs are, and what's really important. What are our basic necessities? And what this creates is a complete lifestyle change. Whereas we really have to examine what we're doing. And then if you start to examine that, you can look at all the cause and effect that's happening in the world. If you plant a garden, you're eliminating gallons and gallons of petroleum out of this cause and effect. Because every time you travel to the market, and then all that stuff that's shipped to the market, plus the fact that you're gaining optimal health by being out there. I mean, we know all the possibilities that can happen in a garden. So we would like to see, and getting back to the course and the content in the course, we talk about water, we talk about moving earth around when it needs to be moved around in order to be able to arrange the landscape where we can hold all of these materials, all of these energies in our landscape, to make use of all of it if possible, the ultimate recycle and reuse. So we would take people out and dig a swale, and a swale is what's known is basically a ditch that's on contour. It's like if you've ever seen a topographical map, that is level, it's dead level, so that when water moves into this swale, into this ditch, it sinks slowly down. So we're trying to slow water down so that it sinks in, and not only does it move down, but it moves by capillary action this way and this way. And then we begin to put plants in, and especially trees. The tree acts as a pump, so it's drawing water up and bringing water down and drawing water up, and then of course it's creating this complete hydrological cycle. So when we are in the course, we will discuss water for a short time in the classroom. Then we bring people out to actually dig a swale, or we'll even put a mound of dirt out there, and they'll dig little ditches and things and try to figure out how to keep water on this mound, and we'll run a hose on it to give them the example. And just last week, we working on a piece of property where this couple had just built a house, but it was pretty much a raw landscape around the house. And we dug a berm and a swale.
What's a berm?
A berm is a raised
Mound.
like a
kind of
mound,
thing.
right?
Okay, all right.
And it rained, what did we get, 7 inches of rain, I think, something like that. And this swale worked beautifully, but there was a breach in the berm that the homeowner saw, and he went out and he repaired it. So see that this process goes on forever. We can put in swales and berms and all these things, but it's up to us to continue that level of observation that we started out with. And this is what Mollison calls protracted observation. Take a year to look at your property before you do anything, but what we say is no. Go ahead and start working on your place, jump in, and then always continue this practice of observation and what's happening in the landscape.
You know what I hear in that part of it is the course is re-embedding humans back where we always came from, back in the land. I mean, we have gotten so terribly remote from that in our civilized world. Terribly
And that's
remote
really
from that.
interesting because you see that's what yoga teaches us as well. It's all one. We're all part of nature. And what we've done is we've separated. You know? We actually see ourselves as separate from nature, so we don't get any of the benefit of that relationship. So permaculture is a very practical out there way of reconnecting with that. Getting your hands back into the earth again and recognizing that you're part of that, the healing of that. It's amazing. The connections between yoga and permaculture, it never ceases to amaze me. But what it does is it confirms a really deep feeling that I had when I first did the course. Wow, there's so much in this. And I remember saying to Bill and Wayne, this is really spiritual. And they said,
We did this.
Don't tell anybody. Because if you think it's spiritual, it's woo-woo. But
Yeah.
no, well, maybe we're talking about truly
Well, we laugh.
primary.
Look, we laugh
really
about it because
spiritual.
when we started doing these courses for Wayne and I, we're just real passionate about the subject, and I think our passion comes through, and within that passion, I think lies the spirit of life or the spirit of community. Because for us, we're just delivering these courses, and we're adamant about it. We give the students as much as we have. We're always improving our courses. We're still working on them, So we throw ourselves at it that much that I think it rubs off, and the students seem to be getting another experience. It's not designed into the course, but they come through this training, I think, feeling permaculture. It's like becomes part of them. It's in their bones.
It's not the head so much as the heart, so there's some real heart connection that opens.
Yeah.
And I have no way of knowing whether that happens in every permaculture course, but how could it be otherwise? Because you are three beings who have a great deal of depth and connection to the source, if you will, the planet, life. And that's going to have to come shining through in your passion and your love, and ignite that, I would expect,
Maybe that's what
in
it is.
all the students, because
Yeah.
I think there's such a hunger. People are so hungry to be reconnected, or connected to the roots.
It's very true. And I always go, I always think to myself, we don't grow anything, but we have the opportunity to prepare the ground for it and set up the circumstances so that we can allow that to take place. It's going to take place anyway, but we don't grow anything, but we can definitely prepare the ground. And I look at that as the same way, that we can uncover in ourselves that ground, and then, grace will follow.
I think that permaculture and the way that you are finding to bring it to people that fits this time and people's lives now, and I would add the incredible need given the economy in the last year here. It says there's probably even deeper need for people, more people are waking up to it, perhaps, that its time has come. Its time has come, and we're grateful to people like you who will devote so much of your time and your lives to doing that.
I think that's what we're saying. People are showing up, and they're ready to learn something at a much deeper level. And they don't just want the how-tos. They want the reasons why, and they want to know that they're on the right path. I think a lot of people show up to our courses, and they find 20 or 30 people that are crazy as they are, and they feel right at home. I'm not alone.
What a treat.
Yeah.
What a treat. What a treat. That's fabulous. Thank you, all of you, for
you.
this wonderful course. Thank you for this chat, and I would like to be a mouse in the pocket at some course when it happens
Look forward to
sometime.
it tonight.
You're watching Peak Moment. We're having conversations about living more locally, more self-reliantly with permaculture. Join us next time.